Hi, I'm Eric. This is the Long Box Review comic book podcast, and welcome to my favorites of 2025, where I discuss and recommend my favorite comic books that I read from the last year. But first, let's talk numbers. I read 856 comics in 2025. This number is different from what I reported in the last episode because I discovered a few books that I had read but forgot to record in my spreadsheet. And I really hate those kinds of oversights on my part. It was just ridiculous that I would read something and forget to record it. Anyway, the majority of what I read were from DC at 40%, followed by Image 24%, and Marvel at 20%. Fourth, fifth, and sixth, respectively, were Dark Horse, which was less than 3% of what I read, Boom at 2%, and IDW at just under 2%. There were others, but all were less than 1%. 51% of my reading was digital, and I can feel my buddy Travis cringing from 300 miles away. That was followed by trade reads at just under 30%, and single issue reads at just under 18%, with original graphic novels at 1%, and then a scattering of other things. Something I added late in my cataloging for the year was the genre counter. The majority of what I read were superhero stories, which is no surprise to me, at 66%. Next at 12% was fantasy books. Sci-fi was nearly 6.5%, and crime and horror were at about 5% each. At nearly 3% was what I called, for lack of a better term, literary. Probably all those OGNs about dealing with the death of a loved one that I read last year, with some other things in there as well, of course. I think next year I will de-emphasize the goal, which was to read at least 750 comic books, and just read, especially a bunch of series that I've had in my collection for years. My wife and I have some trips coming up as well, and that will affect how much I'll be reading and podcasting throughout 2026. So, how did you do with your reading goals for last year? Or do you not care about these kinds of things like I do? By the way, if you are interested in the spreadsheet I use to keep track of these things, go to the How to Like Comics blog, and you can find the download there, and I can include that information in the show notes. Additionally, if you do not listen to Comic Geek Speak, Brian, one of the original founders of the show, recently released his own notebook for cataloging books that he reads, and he's made that available for people to order at a very good price point. As much as I like to write things down, like to-do lists and whatnot, I prefer to put my comics into the spreadsheet that I use. It's just a lot easier for me than to write everything down. Although I'm really tempted to do both. I don't know. Just the visceral feeling of writing things down in a notebook is just a lovely feeling for me anyway. As for the podcast, generally, I was only able to release 23 of the planned 24 episodes last year, which averaged 2 a month, so I was just under that. That's still a consistency that I don't know that I've ever achieved over 15 years of doing this. There was 1 each for My Comics History and Center Seat, 2 each for the Legion Project and The Gutters, 10 Reading Pile episodes, and 7 additional episodes, including my live 15th anniversary extravaganza. Additionally, I posted 15 non-podcast related entries on the Long Box Review website, mostly for other podcast appearances and comic book acquisitions, which I've not been all that consistent with because I got some stuff in late 2025 maybe I'm thinking of early 2026. Here it is. As I'm recording this, it's February 1st, and I've already forgotten when I've gotten some new comics. Anyway, I know I didn't post some of those things. And I put them all away, so I don't want to drag them back out and take pictures and post them. Anyway, I did not get to my planned series of blog posts on the weekly series Trinity, which I've been wanting to do for I think it's like 14 months now. So I will get to that. I have plans. Additionally, my One Hit Wonders episodes. Despite those disappointments, I did get to do a lot of fun episodes, such as the JSA April event hosted by the Fire and Water Network, where I talked about All-Star Comics number 36. The following month, I talked to Sean Ross for the first time about his Wonder Woman podcast, which I was on later in the year. And Maddie and I talked about our Heroes Con adventure as well. In August was my 15th podcast anniversary that I mentioned before, and I celebrated by doing a live Zoom chat, and I had many fine folks join for that wide-ranging conversation. Maddie rejoined me to talk about the 2005 Doctor Who revival series, and in December, George and I did our annual Christmas gab bag, and Peter and I finally released the 4+ hour episode 50 of the Legion Project talking about issue 50. That was the past, but what about the future? Given that I tend to want to shake things up every year, I still want to do more of some things and perhaps less of others. I still want to talk about the comics I'm reading, but also focus on some specific titles or characters like my long anticipated and mentioned spotlight on Ragman. This may require some retooling of the reading pile concept, and I think I know what I'm going to do with that, but until I finalize it and actually record, I don't know. So we may or may not have reading pile episodes in the future. I love doing the My Comics History episodes, but I think I've all but decided to drop my one-hit wonders plan that I've toyed with a few times over the last couple of years. I just never got around to doing it. And I can do it in other ways. Additionally, there are some guests I plan to have on to talk about some specific comics in the coming year. Peter and I should be able to record and release more The Legion Project episodes than last year. And finally, I can't wait to do more Star Trek episodes for the Center Seat imprint. I have a very specific thing that I've been wanting to do for the last year, and didn't get to it last year, obviously, but I will get to that very soon this year. I thank you for your indulgence with all that behind-the-scenes stuff. Now, let's get into my favorite comic books from 2025.
Do you love podcasting but hate editing? Do you have a number of episodes recorded but just can't find the time to get them edited and ready for release? Do you need help and you're not sure what to do? Well, come talk to me. My name is Stephen Orr. I have over a decade of experience recording and editing my own podcasts, and I want to put those skills to work for you. I can remove that background noise. I can reduce silences. I'll remove all of your ums and your uhs, as well as your throat clearings, sneezes, and coughs and such. And I can even add your music and whatnot. And hey, my prices are quite reasonable. Check out edityourpod.com to get started. That's edityourpod.com, or just reach out to me directly. Email edityourpod@gmail.com. Tell me what you need, and I'll tell you how I can help. And more importantly, I'll quote you a cost. edityourpod.com. Get started today.
So as I looked back on the complete list of all the comics I read, I basically focused on the ones where, as I read the title, I felt some sort of joy about the fact that I read it, or there was some specific quality about the book that made me really enjoy it over some of the other things that I read. And so the first of those, and these are kind of more or less in order of reading, so to speak, because some of these are a group of comics, and obviously I read those throughout the year. But first up is Audrey Hepburn from NBM, which was recently bought by some other company, I think. I don't remember which one. Anyway, this is by Michelle Boton and Dolores Giochetto. And all these books I've talked about to some degree over the last year. I'm just going over them again to remind you of these books, and as I said, recommend these books as well. This biographical graphic novel was a delight from when I first saw the cover in previews. As I look back on last year, that image from the cover of Audrey in the white dress looking at us coyly just popped right to the front of my mind. I not only learned more about the role she played in her movies, but also Audrey the person, including her insecurities, frustrations, and activism. It was just a nice piece of art about one of my favorite actresses. Next is Batman and Robin Year One. Big surprise, right? Issues 3 through 12 that I read last year by Mark Waid, Chris Samnee, Giovanna Nero, Matt Lopes, and Clayton Coles. When I found out that Samnee and Waid were teaming up to tell a story updated for the 21st century about one of my favorite characters in superhero comics, Robin, I knew it would be fantastic. And I was not disappointed. I loved everything about it. The way Samnee drew the characters, which was obviously no surprise to me, and Gotham in his dark aesthetic, the relationships between Bruce and Alfred, Bruce and Dick, and all three as depicted in the visuals and with Waid's dialogue, and how much personality they both gave a young Dick Grayson, something those previous origin stories did not do as well, in my opinion, except for maybe Robin and Batman. In fact, I toyed with the idea of doing an episode on the best Robin moments from the series for December, sometime in December. However, since I didn't do that, here are some of my favorite moments from the issues that I read, but they're not just Robin moments. It's just my favorite moments from the series, from those issues. Number 1, from issue 3, Alfred yells at Batman. Alfred keeps trying to get Bruce's attention so he can talk about how Dick is doing, but Bruce is so wrapped up in the case that he's investigating, he's not listening to Alfred until Alfred literally yells at Bruce. Bruce then responds, quote, "That's the first time you've ever raised your voice at me, Alfred. I don't like it. But you wouldn't have without good reason. I'm sorry." So not only is it a good Alfred scene, it's a good one for Bruce as well. And that's one of the things I like generally about the series was Bruce Wayne is not the brooding Dark Knight that doesn't need anybody and is gruff and all that stuff that we saw throughout the various decades. This is a guy who's really trying. He's struggling, and he does his best, but it's not always good enough, such as that scene. Number 2, from issue 4, the surprise inspection. Social worker Laura pops up unexpectedly to check on Dick. During the conversation, Dick throws Bruce's earlier words back at him in front of Laura. After she leaves, Bruce quotes Dick's words, and Dick's response is, "I enjoy keeping you on your toes." So Dick is not this wallflower kid who's, shy or anything like that. He was raised in a circus, for God's sake. So I think that Waid and Samnee did a really good job of making Dick have a bit more agency. Number 3, issue 5, Wayne as a verb. Dick lasts 1 hour at school, and Bruce manages, as he puts it, quote, "to Wayne the principal to keep Dick's tantrum off the record." Later, Alfred quietly asks Bruce, "Did you just use Wayne as a verb?" That was funny. Number 4, issue 6, Highwire Act. Robin escapes from Grimaldi and jerry rigs a line as a high wire to cross the space between two buildings. As he's about halfway, he notices Batman watching him. Dick says to him, "Oh, hey, about time, dude." Bruce has an admiring grin. Later, Bruce asks Dick to teach him how to walk a tightrope. Number 5, issue 9, The Talk. After a tense night of crime fighting and an unusually quiet Robin, Alfred tries to get Dick to open up to him. He lets Dick know he knows that day was Dick's mother's birthday. Alfred also tells Dick that has not shown any grief. He pleads with him, "Talk to me." Dick shouts back at Alfred with tears in his eyes as to why he hasn't shown any grief. He says, "Because performers don't cry." Dick then immediately wraps his arms around Alfred, who hugs him as Dick cries quietly. Just a wonderful, quiet moment. In the end, between these two. Number 6, issue 10, Hep. One of the Clayfaces impersonates Batman and throws Robin off the GCPD roof. The real Batman jumps and grabs Robin, telling him, "Front angel pose, Hep." A smiling Robin tells him later, "Hey, somebody's learning trapeze lingo." So, so here we are 4 issues later, and Bruce has made an effort on Dick's behalf to meet Dick halfway or to, to engage with Dick in that way. I just thought that was wonderful. Number 7, issue 11, The Rescue. After Dick is taken from Bruce because he was framed for a crime he did not commit, of course, he's placed in foster care. Batman later engages with Two-Face and Clayface and comes out on the losing side. Clayface tosses him out a window. As Batman falls, he's resigned to his death when a green-gloved hand catches him and brings him safely to the roof of a nearby building. Robin stands over his mentor and chastises him, quote, "Alone? Are you insane?" So, this is a little bit of the roles being reversed a bit between these two. And with Robin, again, like showing agency. He's got some stakes in this. He's a partner. He thinks of himself as Batman's partner, not as his sidekick, his subordinate. I really like that. Number 8, issue 12, No Guns. During the final fight between the dynamic duo and the Faces, Two-Face gets the drop on Robin and has him at gunpoint. Robin quickly gets into Two-Face's head by inciting his use of the coin. This distracts Two-Face enough that Robin is able to take him down and yells, "No guns!" at him. This is a reference to an earlier scene in which Robin had picked up a gun from one of Grimaldi's men, I think, and Batman immediately hits it away and yells in Dick's face, "No guns." I thought that was a nice callback. And finally, number 9, also from issue 12, Partners. Batman and Robin have saved Gotham, and with Commissioner Gordon's help, they stage a press conference announcing the duo as civilian consultants. After they leave, Robin asks what Batman is thinking. He tells Robin, quote, "I'm just wondering how many criminals in this town would hope to have a chance against us." Robin responds triumphantly, "Yeah, you are. Look out, Gotham. Here comes the dynamic duo." Like I said, these are just the main ones. There were so many smaller moments that helped make the series one of my very favorites of this last year. I loved how Bruce is slowly learning to be a father figure, and Dick helps him realize that working with and relying on others isn't a bad thing. They are father and son, but as I just described, by the end of the series, also becoming partners. Next up is Absolute Wonder Woman, issues 3 through 14 that I read, by Kelly Thompson, Hayden Sherman, and Mattia de Ayulis. I've talked before about how I was not excited at all for the Absolute line. I preferred that they direct that talent and creativity onto the lead characters' books. But since I pay for the DC app, of course I was going to read them. Of the 3 I read in 2025, Absolute Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, Absolute Wonder Woman was and continues to be my favorite. I stopped reading the Batman title after the first 6 issues, and while I continue to read Superman, it is Thompson's and Sherman's Absolute Wonder Woman that captured my attention. I liked it enough to buy the trade collections after reading those issues on the DC app. This is a Wonder Woman who carries Diana's ideals despite being raised in hell. It is a Diana who uses magic as well as a lasso and sword. Sherman's panel and page layouts are delightful and different from a typical superhero comic book. And I love how he draws Diana as a tall and stout woman, which is different from how she's been traditionally displayed. I also love the backstory told over several issues showing how her adopted mother, Circe, came to care for and love Diana as a daughter and prepare her for the trials we would read in these issues. Thompson proves time and time again that she has a perfect grasp on the characters she shepherds. I loved her work on Hawkeye and West Coast Avengers for the same reason. And it should be no surprise that the next one on my list is Wonder Woman, the main title, issues 16 through 27, by Tom King, Daniel Sampere, Bruno Redondo, Kerry Randolph, Gilliam March, Caitlin Yarsky, Caio Filippi, Tomeo Mori, Jorge Fornes, Adriana Lucas, Alex Guimaraes, and Clayton Coles. This series continues to be one of my very favorites to read each month. It's the first one I read when it gets released. We got the end of the war with a sovereign, with some wonderful Wonder Girls moments, and team-ups with a very Columbo-like Detective Chimp and one with Batman, who gets zapped by Zeus. I will reserve judgment for now on the Mouseman arc. But man, that dialogue is so irritating. I get what Tom King is going for, but it's just like, oh my God, how many times do I have to read the same 3 phrases? Next is another superhero book, of course, Fantastic Four, issues 26 through 33 for that volume, and issues 1 through 3 of the following volume. This is by Ryan North, Ivan Fiorelli, Brian Reber, Joe Caramagna, Steve Cummings, Jesus Abertov, Wayne Foucher, Corey Smith, Oren Jr., Humberto Ramos, Victor Alazaba, Edgar Delgado, and Travis Lanham. That's a lot of people over those issues. Just like Wonder Woman, this series, regardless of its renumbering near the end of the year, is my go-to Marvel comic. In fact, it's largely kept me continuing to use the Marvel app. Well, that and I guess more recently, One World Under Doom. And this has been a great companion to the event book. But what makes this special is how North and company explore this family's dynamic, giving each member a chance to shine. Multiple times, in fact. I also loved how the Fantastic Four showed us that helping however they could in the midst of the doom takeover of the world is still valuable and impactful. That is, doing what we can to help others in this horrible world in which we now live. One of my very favorite issues from this run was issue 30, where we get to see what happens to Ben Grimm after Doom cures him of his cosmic ray affliction in one of the One World Under Doom issues. Spoilers, it doesn't go well. Ben eventually asks the Puppet Master for help, and Ben comes out of it changed on the outside, but it's only through talking to Alicia and admitting the depth of his pain and struggle that he's able to start healing on the inside. And and I talked about that particular issue before in one of the Reading Pile episodes, and just that scene between Alicia and Ben when he breaks down just tears me up, man. Issue 33 made me mad that I actually came to like Herbie. I think I talked about this also as well. Herbie was the Fantastic Four equivalent to Scrappy Doo when I was younger and watching cartoons. And I hated both of those cartoon characters. So great job making Herbie an interesting character, North and company. The relaunch allowed North and Ramos to explore what makes the core team special, at least at first, and with more ties to the One World Under Doom event. So kind of reintroducing the FF to people that may have heard about the previous run, and with the movie coming out and all that stuff. So, it was a good, I think a good ploy on Marvel's part, or good, I shouldn't say ploy, a good marketing idea on Marvel's part to restart the series. A new book that I started reading last year is The Power Fantasy. I read issues 1 through 11. This is from Image Comics, by Kieran Gillen, Casper Wingard, Clayton Coles, and Ryan Hughes. I love it when creators examine the super powerful characters through the lens of what if they existed in the real world? How would governments react? How would the supers affect the world in both large ways and small? We've seen that done in other ways, of course. Miracle Man, Watchmen, and Jupiter's Circle spring to my mind. But what's unique about this take is that, one, there's a limited number of them. Think they're the equivalent of countries that have nuclear capability in our world. Two, just like our mutually assured destruction détente world, these supers keep each other in check, although barely. Volume 1 sets up this world and introduces us to the major players: Etienne Lux, Valentina, Masumi, Magus, Heavy, and Eliza. In Volume 2, one of the supers attempts to change the balance of power, and we find out he's not who everyone thinks he is, which was a great reveal. I think in issue 11? 10? 11? I don't know. Gillen and Wingard are giving us big ideas in such a pretty package. You almost wish you could live in that world. Well, except for when Nixon bombed New Mexico to try and get rid of Valentina, and the obliteration of Western Europe, which I'm not sure, I don't remember what happened there. But anyway, good book. I can't wait to read Volume 3. A limited series that I highly enjoyed last year was Helen of Windhorn. This was from Dark Horse, had 6 issues. This is by Tom King, Bilquis Evely, Matt Lopes, and Clayton Coles. This was a delightful period fantasy. I think the story within a story approach goes at least 4 layers deep, and I love when comics get meta and creators play around with tropes and genre. King is pretty good at that, even if he isn't always successful, but this book really sings because of Evely's art. She excelled at portraying multiple different time periods and a Conan-like fantasy world. It's just a beautiful book to look at, and I can't wait to reread this one. Next book on my list is the second of one of the 3 OGNs that I have, My Time Machine from Fantagraphics by Carol Leigh. A sci-fi trope I love is time travel, specifically seeing the pasts or futures, meaning not just suddenly appearing in a time period and the rest of the story is set there, but seeing the traveler have experiences across different time periods. Not only does this graphic novel scratch that itch for me, it also tries to wrestle with how things are today, specifically our anxiety about the pandemic, how far-right politics infest our lives, and the death of our climate. Leigh infuses her story with some near-future probabilities, and the further she goes, some wonderful science fiction extrapolation. This book made me happy and sad in nearly equal measures, which is a rare thing. It's either one or the other. So this was a fun book, but also concerning in some of the things that she is tackling in the ways that she does. Speaking of time periods, Redcoat is next. I read issues 1 through 14. This is from Image Comics by Jeff Johns, Brian Hitch, Andrew Curry, Brad Anderson, and Rob Lee. I've already praised both volumes of this in preceding Reading Pile episodes, which meant including Redcoat in my favorites list was really a no-brainer. Of course, the main reasons of this are Hitch's art and the historical setting. Thrown in the seemingly magical undercurrent to the United States of America, and Simon Pure's role in all of this throughout the centuries just hits all of my other buttons besides sci-fi. Historical stuff is also one of my favorite tropes or genres. Hitch and Johns are at their finest with how charming Pure is, though the line Pure recites in every issue is starting to grate. Just like Tom King's Mouseman dialogue, but whatever. I look forward to this each volume with anticipation. All right, I mentioned One World Under Doom already, and I'm going to talk about it again. Although I've only read issues 1 through 8 of the 9-issue series, Marvel released that on the app so I can read it, for crying out loud. This is by Ryan North, R.B. Silva, David Curiel, and Travis Lanham. I generally eschew event books, though reading DC and Marvel's events on their apps make them more palatable. But the incentive to read One World Under Doom, mostly for me, was this. Ryan North was writing it. His run on Fantastic Four proved to me that he could do an event book, especially if Dr. Doom was the star. Watching Doom outwit the heroes and turn civilians to his side was an awful reminder of what we're living through in the U.S., but also gives us a glimpse through the looking glass at what benevolent dictatorship could be. And I'll be damned if it didn't look that bad. In comparison, old President Cheeto is infinitely worse than Doom ever could be. Anyway, I love that this story isn't a typical superpowered slugfest. Though the heroes try beating down Doom a few times, they had to resort to subterfuge and debating Doom on television before they really made any headway. That and somehow Maria Hill knew something that the rest of them did not. Of course, we all knew going into this that Doom was up to no good and he would be his own undoing if the pattern repeats. I can't wait to see his reaction to what he did at the end of issue 8. How will he come back from that? But it has been a fun adventure so far. I also want to point out that David Curiel's colors really make this series shine for me. He uses such a vibrant palette. I don't know how things look printed, but on my iPad, those colors just stab you right in the eyeballs with joy. Speaking of joy, Star Trek Lower Decks Warp Your Own Way from IDW. This was a graphic novel by Ryan North, Chris Finoglio, Charlie Kirkhoff, and Jeff Eckelberry. This book combined two of my favorite things from when I was a kid, Star Trek and Choose Your Own Adventure books. I got it, though, because of Ryan North's work on Fantastic Four. I thought if I'm enjoying him on that series, which includes a bunch of sci-fi elements that he throws in all the time, and I love it, then surely he'd be good on a Star Trek adventure. Plus, the antics of the Cerritos' crew seemed tailor-made for Mr. North's sense of humor. And I was not wrong. Even better, this is not your typical choose-your-own adventure. You actually had to think through some solutions to know where to go next. It was sometimes challenging, but never to the point of tedium. It was just fun. Fun for adults. If I got my way, Ryan North would write a Warp Your Own Way book for all the Star Trek crews. While we wait for that, I highly recommend you pick up his books To Be or Not to Be and Romeo and or Juliet, both choose-your-own-adventure style books, with the latter having over 46 quadrillion distinct adventures, according to North's introduction. I started reading Romeo and or Juliet, and it's just been a lot of fun. Next up is a book that I did not talk about specifically. I did mention it a few times. This is Titans Annual 2025 by Phil Jimenez, Arif Prianto, and Wes Abbott. I really wanted to cover this issue last year separately, but didn't get around to it in time. So I had decided to talk about it in the detail it deserved here on this episode. But while I was compiling my notes, I changed my mind yet again, because this issue really needs a more in-depth treatment from me. So look for that in the near future. Otherwise, I just loved how we get a lot of Wonder Girl and Titans history before Donna deals with her biological father, who had recently reached out to her, which is the impetus of the story. This annual is drawn exquisitely by Jimenez. I fell in love with Donna when Perez drew her in New Teen Titans, and Jimenez continues that tradition. This more mature Donna is just as beautiful, if not more so. I wish Jimenez could chart her life more. I also love how he focuses on Donna's life on Paradise Island, her role on the Titans, and her friendship with Dick, as well as her regrets about her ex-husband and their son. This is a story about identity, love, loss, and what comes next. More later. Batman Dark Patterns, the 12-issue limited series, is next by Dan Waters, Hayden Sherman, Triona Farrell, and Frank Zvetkovich. I just talked about this in the last Reading Pile episode, so I won't belabor the point. But I will add, this is the Batman comic I want to read every month. He's investigating, looking for clues and patterns, and even better, making mistakes along the way, but he compensates because that's what Batman does. As I said in that Reading Pile episode, if DC doesn't do more of this series, perhaps with a different creative team each time, they are just leaving money on the table. I have ordered the collection of this. It's one of my favorite Batman stories in a very long time. I do have another Absolute series on here, which I neglected to mention that I read in the previous Absolute Wonder Woman entry. Absolute Martian Manhunter, issues 1 through 6 by Dennis Camp, Javier Rodriguez, and Hassan Otsman-Elhaou. As I've said before, I knew I would read this because Javier Rodriguez was drawing it. His rendition of our favorite Martian and how Corrigan interprets what he's seeing because of his otherworldly companion is just delightful. It was so successful, this series, that they extended it beyond its initial 6 issues. I think it's now a 12-issue run? I'm not sure. What I hope they can get into is how the Martian Manhunter fits into this larger Darkseid-infested world, as well as the other characters that we've seen. But given how the other books I've read have progressed, I don't think that's a priority, and that's okay. One of the more delightful aspects of this book, besides the use of smoke as metaphor and the brilliant colors, have been the page tricks used in the 1st and 6th issues. As I'm reading this series digitally, I can only imagine what the actual intended effect was, but it was fun to see regardless. And I can kind of see it in the trade collection that I got. but it doesn't quite work with the trade as well as a single issue. Still wonderful ways to combine imagery that you don't see that very often. Here is the final original graphic novel that is on my favorites list. It is In Mourning from Maverick Publishing by Paula Cheshire. Choosing this book as one of my favorites may be influenced by its counseling aspect after the death of my father. I don't know that I learned much of anything new, but it was very comforting to see someone expressing similar thoughts and feelings after the death of a parent. I keep seeing that massive lines I mentioned the last time I discussed the book that is represented in it as a metaphor for how Paula was feeling after her mother died. That image really stuck with me all these months and probably beyond because of its veracity. Would this book have been on my favorites list had my father not died before I read it? Perhaps not, but it deserves its spot on this list now. And my final favorite of 2025 is Assorted Crisis Events. I read issues 1 through 5. This is from Image Comics and by Dennis Camp. There's that name again. Eric Zawadzki, Jordi Belair, and Hassan Otsman-Elhaou. One thing I mentioned previously about this series was how it is, on the surface, like a sci-fi version of the celebrated Ice Cream Man anthology series. But as disturbing and creative as Ice Cream Man is, Assorted Crisis Events does that and more for me because it is more character-focused, I think. You get the sense that you're living through the ordeals these characters endure, whereas in Ice Cream Man, it's more akin to watching an episode of The Twilight Zone and just seeing what happens to them. I do not want to sound like I'm disparaging Ice Cream Man at all. I love that series. But Assorted Crisis Events entertains me in a different way and satisfies me as a reader differently. It just has a bit more meat on the bone, so to speak, for me. And I cannot wait. Again, much like some of these other books I've chosen, I can't wait for the next volume to read. All right, those are all the books I have to recommend to you that I've talked about throughout the year. But before I go, I have a few more things to talk about here. First up is more stats. Out of the 16 titles that are my favorites, I read DC the most, with 6 on the list, followed by 5 different small press works, 1 each, then Image with 3, and Marvel finishing the list at 2. The genres that I read ended up at 9 superhero, 3 sci-fi, 2 fantasy, and 2 nonfiction / literary titles. Speaking of 2s, here are some pairs I noticed after compiling this list. There are 2 Wonder Woman titles, 2 Batman titles, 2 Absolutes, 2 books drawn by Hayden Sherman on 2 different DC characters, 2 books written by Dennis Camp, 2 books written by Tom King, and 2 titles that have Dick Grayson in them. Just for kicks. Beyond those pairings, it would seem that Ryan North is my favorite writer of 2025 with 3 titles on the list. And if I had to choose a favorite artist, it would have to be Hayden Sherman for some of the things that I said before. And finally, before I go, I got some feedback. I asked people, what were some of your favorites from 2025? And I believe this was all on Blue Sky. Patrick told me, have to include Bug Wars from Jason Aaron and Mahmoud Esrar on the list. Mark said, big shout out to Orla, which is something I'm not familiar with. So I'll have to look that up. And We're Taking Everyone Down with Us. I have that volume, but I haven't read that first volume, but I haven't read that yet. Scott said EC's Epitaphs from the Abyss, Catacomb of Torment, Cruel Universe, Images Creepshow, Universal, Skybound's The Mummy, and Invisible Man. And finally, from Dr. Pop Culture USA, Batman and Robin Year 1 was head and shoulders the best comic book series I've read in years. And the Iron Age of Comics seconded that notion. Thanks to Patrick, Mark, Scott, Dr. Pop, and Iron Age for their feedback when I asked for that on Blue Sky. What were your favorite comic books of 2025? Please let me know by sending me an email at longboxreview@gmail.com. You can leave voicemail or text me at 208-953-1841 or converse with me on social media at longboxreview. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.